Happy Pride. I'm going to share with you my Pride story. For me, it's not so much a Pride story as it is a kind of confusion story. So to begin at the very beginning, the first gay person I ever knew about was my Uncle Ellis. And nobody ever called him gay. My goodness. We didn't call him anything other than Uncle Ellis. And in fact, for the first several years of my life, the only word or phrase that my family had for people who were gay was like Uncle Ellis. So this is the environment that I grew up in, which is interesting because the family was Southern Baptist and I think they probably, well, I know that they had very conservative views on homosexuality, but on the other hand, it was the 60s into the 70s, and it just wasn't in the foreground at all. And so there wasn't a strong need that people felt to judge the lifestyle or anything like that. Uh, and I never actually knew Uncle Ellis. He was married to one of my mother's sisters, actually mom's oldest sister, who was like 20 years older than my mother. So I knew my Aunt Edna, but I did not know Uncle Ellis. I think he may have passed away before I was born in 1967. So, you know, it wasn't really controversial. It was just, oh, Aunt Edna married Uncle Ellis. Anyway, then the next person, or the first person I actually knew in person who was gay, was the brother of my sister-in-law. So he felt like family kind of by proxy because his sister married my brother, and uh, and so I grew up knowing Jim. Now the reason, okay, that probably sounds weird that my sister-in-law's brother is somebody that I grew up knowing. But you see, my siblings were all teenagers when I was born. So, yeah, my brother, who was 16 when I was born, one of my earliest memories is of his wedding. And so I've known his wife my whole life. And so her family felt like my family. And so I knew Jim, and Jim was just a beautiful, gentle, kind person that was a part of my world. And he didn't make it out of the 80s for the same reason that many young men didn't make it out of the 80s, young gay men. And yet I was so young. Like in the 80s, I was in not elementary school, but junior high and high school. And I was just really shielded from what was going on with Jim. Uh, and then he was gone. And that was very sad because I loved Jim. He was a wonderful person to have in my life. So when I was in seventh grade, I signed up for a pen pal, and I was a romantic. And so I wanted to write to a slightly older boy. I was hoping he might be like 1 year older than me. And I wanted to write to somebody in England because I believed that that was my ancestry. And when I finally got word that, yes, I had been paired with a boy in England, turns out he was like 4 years older than me, which was just shocking. And I was afraid that, oh no, here I am. I'm going to be writing to a teenager, and teenagers are bad. So I wrote to him with like this whole list of rules of what we were and were not going to do in our correspondence. And apparently he was so entertained by that that he actually wrote back. Uh, but when he wrote back and said, I'm afraid that I'm not actually 15, which I think is what the little slip of paper said that I had. I'm actually 16 and my birthday is next week. I'm going to be 17. So, my goodness, this older man I was going to be writing to. But I did. And we kept writing all through junior high and high school. He actually came and visited me, came and stayed with my family for like 3 weeks over Christmas break towards the end of my high school. And man, I was just over the moon with the romance of this. My parents even kind of bought in because after he arrived and they met him and started getting to know him, my dad came to me and he said, "We just want you to know we approve." And oh my goodness, I had such plans. I just knew that we were gonna, wind up married in England. Uh, well, nothing happened during that visit. A few years later, he came to visit again, another 3-week visit with my parents over Christmas break. And then a few years after that, I went and visited him in the spring. And I really thought that something was going to happen between us because, I mean, by this time we were all. But see, what I didn't fully appreciate was that he was not feeling entirely straight himself, and he was starting to have relationships with men, and nothing ever happened between us. And then he came out to me, and I was like, well, fuck. But I also didn't have too many eggs left in that basket anymore because just what obviously was not going to happen. Uh, he actually wound up being one of the attendants in my wedding because he's just one of the dearest men, and I do love him dearly. I don't know if he's ever going to get on TikTok, so I won't do a shout out, but yeah. So that was my second in-person dearly gay friend. When I got to college, I was having a great time, loved making friends. There were highs and there were lows. And then in my senior year, I was living in the international dorm, and there was a young woman that came in as a freshman, and she moved in across the hall from me. And I just thought she was the coolest. I mean, I was an Amy Grant fan and she was an Amy Grant fan, and I sang and she sang, and I just like glommed onto her, and it just felt like fast friends forever. And then it started to feel, I think for her, like it might be a little on the too close side, like a little suffocating. And I did tend towards clinginess when I was in college. So she took a step back, which kind of freaked me out and confused me because I was ready to plan our retirement together, And after a few months of this kind of push-pull dynamic between us, she sat down with me and just very seriously asked me if there was any chance that I might have romantic... No, actually, the word she used was sexual. If I might have some sexual feelings towards her. And I was like, ooh. No. But then I went back and I thought about it. And over a period of, well, I don't know how long, but I gave it tons of thought and finally came to the conclusion that, I don't think I have sexual feelings towards you, but I'm very well might have romantic feelings towards you. And that felt like a really important and significant distinction for me. The push-pull dynamic and my over-clinginess continued. Eventually, there was an incident where I got fired from my job, and things kind of came to a head with her. I just decided that I needed to remove myself, because having her living right across the hall from me while I was trying to somehow figure out how to have healthy boundaries with her, I could not do it. I could not navigate that. So I moved into a different dorm. I started in with therapy. This was the beginning of a long and important relationship between myself and the whole arena of mental health. But I kept kind of ruminating on what happened with her. I actually wrote a book. And, you know, I was a Christian. I had been raised Southern Baptist. I had gone through a whole kind of charismatic / Pentecostal phase. And those conservative Christian evangelical values were my world. And so when I wrote my book, I gave it a title that I thought would appeal to a conservative Christian audience. And I had these fantasies. It was going to be published by InterVarsity Christian Press. The title I gave it was, "Does This Mean I'm a Lesbian?" And in the end, I know that the conclusion that I came to was that no, it does not necessarily mean that I'm a lesbian. It's true. But I eventually did actually send it to InterVarsity, and they were so kind. They wrote back and said that, we feel like you're still too close to the events of what happened here. Let it sit for a while and then revisit it. And if you want to do a rewrite at that point and send it back to us, that might be something that we'll consider at the time. I never did. But so I thought that I was not, I don't know, I was confused, for crying out loud. One of my closest friends came out to me, and he came out to me as bisexual. Eventually he decided, I'm gay. But at the time he came out to me as bisexual, and he was not letting people know in general. And actually the girl that the object of my affection had started partnering with, when she came to me, and we had a conversation about whether or not they were involved in a lesbian relationship, because that was just so scandalous. She was trying to talk to me about how, people are not their stereotypes and blah, blah, blah. And so she pointed out this friend of mine, Steve, who had come out to me, and she said, he's not gay, and he's interested in opera and art and decorating and all this stuff. And he had already come out to me, and I was like, And she looked at me and was like, oh, okay, bad example. I did not mean to out him. I was just so sucked into my own mess and the weirdness that was being queer in the 80s. After I graduated from college, I was really confused about my career, because I had majored in organizational communication. And then when I had actually taken the organizational communication class, I tanked it. I think I got a D. And in a large part, it was because I was depressed and had not yet started therapy, and I was just barely functioning. So So I graduated with this degree, and I felt like I had a degree in being nice, and that was all I knew how to do. So I got these temp jobs, mostly clerical kind of stuff. And then I was house sitting for friends, and while I was house sitting, they had HBO, so I was watching HBO. And I saw this documentary called Stories from the Quilt. And I was exposed really for the first significant time to what it was like for these young men who had AIDS to not only be ostracized for being gay, but then to kind of have this double whammy of ostracization? I don't know, is that a word? Because of having AIDS. And how much was happening to them because of the church. And I was floored and horrified that this was happening, that the church was not responding to them with love and care. I just could not understand that. And so I decided that what I wanted to do professionally was to, I don't know, help. So I kind of created this future job for myself that I would start trying to move towards, of being a live-in administrator for an AIDS hospice. And at the time, that seemed like that was what was going to be needed. So I started by volunteering for this organization in Greensboro, North Carolina, where I'd gone to college and where I was living at the time. And it was just an AIDS care organization that was connecting volunteers with people who had AIDS. I think they called it the Buddy Project. I'm not sure. I don't remember. I just remember I had this t-shirt that just said, "Hey, buddy." Because, it was North Carolina. And so I got trained as a buddy and started working with whatever they had that they wanted help with. So one of the things that I did get paired up with a buddy who was actually a young woman. They thought I would be a good match for her because she had, what was it? It's not bipolar. The other one that starts with a B that is really super common. Oh my God. Okay, you're going to tell me what it is, I'm sure. Anyhow, they paired her up with me because they thought I would have really good boundaries. I didn't. I had no idea. I don't know why they thought I would have good boundaries. I had no idea what I was doing. And then I volunteered for the phone bank, like the hotline, when Magic Johnson came out. And that was, it was really sad, but there was so much energy. There was actually a lot of love and laughter manning the hotline. I got to know some really flamboyant North Carolinian gay guys. They knew that I was a Christian girl, and so they kept trying to shock me, and it worked. I was totally shocked. I saw my first glory hole, which delighted them, and of course scarred me for life. But that was a big deal. But that then led me to my next big thing. I was interested in training that was pretty close to my college education, and so I helped them with training. I helped put together volunteer training that was kind of becoming my thing, and that led me to my next career adventure. I kind of got recruited by Tony Campolo to come to his office, and he was really interested in starting an AIDS ministry, but he needed somebody to be really focused on it. And I accepted this invitation. Now, I do not know if he really meant to offer me a job. but I accepted the job and I moved to Philadelphia. I was young in my career and in life, and I just didn't know how job offers actually worked. So anyway, so I showed up in Philadelphia. They gave me a job as the person in his office who would type up his correspondence. And the idea was that, yeah, I would be also working on putting together an AIDS ministry for him. But I was young in my career and I had no idea how to do what I had been given the opportunity to do. So I really just focused on typing his correspondence, and I got really good at typing. My typing speed got up to 72 minutes or words per minute. That's really all I accomplished. I did get to meet Steve Camp, hung out with him a little bit, hung out with Tony Campolo a little bit, had some fun experiences there. But eventually had some energy management issues and just wound up moving back home to Greensboro. Spent a full year there. Moved back to Greensboro, spent a year in Greensboro, but then, I had my sights set. I had been accepted to Princeton Theological Seminary, so I was looking forward to getting started as a seminary student. And then I managed to snag a summer job in Philadelphia just before starting seminary with an AIDS ministry in Philly that was connected to 10th Presbyterian Church, and it just sounded wonderful. And so I accepted. They asked me to come and work in the office, but also to help coordinate and put together volunteer trainings. So I did that, and it was wonderful. I loved the guys that I was working with in the office. But I had kind of some odd experiences there because the ministry that I was working for, which was called Hope, shared its offices with a ministry called Harvest that I didn't really fully understand, and everything. Okay, there's something I didn't tell you about working for Tony, which was that Tony was a sociologist and a Baptist evangelist. And so he was, I guess, theologically evangelical, but he had very liberal ideas and I guess you could call them policies, because he had also run for public office. He served as advisor to presidents of the United States on social issues. He was generally very liberal and socially conscious, but he was conservative theologically, doctrinally, when it came to people who were gay. So he was one of the ones that would espouse an attitude of kind of love the sinner, hate the sin, or love the person, but in order for a person who was gay to be really acceptable in the kingdom of God, they had to be celibate. That was his thinking, his theory. And when I was working in his office, I got to know a lot of really intriguing ways of having a conservative or evangelical theory of how things worked, but putting them together with what should be responsible social blah blah blah. So like, it was a very anti-apartheid office. It was the early 90s. I learned about being completely pro-life. I think Completely Pro-Life might have been the name of an organization that was also headquartered in the same offices where I was working. So Completely Pro-Life meant, yeah, okay, we're against abortion, but we're also against the death penalty. We're also against doing anything that takes away the quality of life for a person who is alive in the world. So there need to be social safety net programs. There need to be support programs that mean that if you have a child because you did not have the abortion, you have a great deal of support that helps you to raise that child, or you have easy access, whatever, and I really appreciate it. I grew to have an appreciation for those ways of retaining, I don't know, being fully congruous with your beliefs. And so I wanted that in this was part of my confusion. I wanted the integrity, the congruity, and I did not know what kind of impact that still could have on others. So it put me on a path for at least a time where, like, when the gay marriage activism started, I would move towards it's too soon, that kind of thinking and messaging. I believed that we would get there eventually, but I thought we should take our time and let people come around and all of that kind of thing. So here I was working in the office in 1992, the summer of 1992, working for Hope, putting together their volunteer training, but also answering the phone in the office for this other organization called Harvest. And if you were in Philadelphia at the time, you already know that Harvest was an anti-gay ministry, which I knew that's what they did, but I did not understand what that meant. And I was only being informed by the people who were running this ministry, who were gay and who were doing the best that they could. They were doing what seemed right to them. They didn't know that it was toxic. I didn't know. So, okay, here we are, all in this office, working together, trying to just do the best we could. And I got a phone call from a guy who was, I think he was just getting off on telling stories to a Christian girl. Honestly, that's what I think he was doing. But I heard this story, and I took it at full face value, and it sounded like corroboration that the ex-gay ministry was on the right track, that they were helping to combat something real and terrible that was happening out in the world. I no longer believe any of that, which I hope you can get from my voice. But that's kind of where I was, and that's the mindset that I was in when I went to seminary. This is the middle. This is the uncomfortable part where the confusion is at its deepest. And this is where I start seminary. Having had all of my own experiences as a questioning and possibly bi young woman, and then working for an AIDS ministry that shared offices with an ex-gay ministry, and here I come into seminary, and I've already had this wonderful experience with gay folks in Greensboro, so eager to reconnect with the queer community at seminary. So when I find out that there's a meeting happening, I go. And I'm excited. I'm excited to get to know people. I'm excited to start hearing their stories. We're sitting in this room where it's a huge room, great big circle of people, and we're all introducing ourselves. Actually, I think we did all of that. But anyhow, we got to a point in the meeting where people started talking about ex-gay ministries. And I really just should have shut up and listened to what they were saying and give myself a chance to learn what it meant to people that these ex-gay ministries were out there and doing harm. But I didn't. All I knew was I had a story to share. I had just, like, probably weeks earlier, maybe less than a month earlier, been working for an ex-gay ministry. Not really for them, but I was answering their phone. So I shared a story, the story that this guy had told me over the phone that was probably completely bogus. But I was sharing it from a sense of, hey, I'm hearing what you're saying about how terrible these ex-gay ministries are, but here's a story this guy told me, and it sounded to me like he really needed that ex-gay ministry. Shouldn't we also honor his experience? Well, that did not go well. The gay community put me in the camp of the ex-gay folks, and I never could get past that. I really tried. There were folks there that I really thought would be able to, I'd be able to connect with, and they just wouldn't let me be a part of their community. Anyhow, my last year, I finally connected with a lesbian group over at Princeton University called Women Oriented Women. And I thought that would maybe be my community. But then there were one or two women from the seminary that showed up at those meetings as well. And I kind of felt like, well, fuck it. Just never mind. And I know that they were looking at me like, what's she doing here? And they may have even been open to talking with me and understanding what my story was at that point. But I was tired. I was done. So, yeah. And meanwhile, between 1992 and 1997, when I finally graduated from this 3-year program, go fig, AIDS became a different kind of story. It stopped being a guaranteed death sentence, and I don't know, it became something that people were figuring out that you could live with. And so my ideas about the AIDS hospice definitely went away. The fact that I was shunned by the gay community in seminary meant, I guess I'm not going to even try to be a part of this movement at all. So then I met my husband. Oh, to get into the details of that would be just way too much and way too long. But he knew that I considered myself bisexual. And really, all of my friends knew that I considered myself bisexual. Even though the gay community had shunned me. But so I got married and I was out in my marriage. The people who were outside of my immediate circle did not know that I was bi, so I was not out to them. And then after I left seminary, it started to seem like gay people don't really like me. So I'm just going to stop telling people that I'm bi. Especially since I was married. I didn't want to have to explain what I meant. It was too fraught, you know? So I would tell my therapists, usually, if If it felt totally irrelevant, then I might skip it, but most of the time I would tell them because it was part of my story. And the further and further I got away from college and seminary, the less useful it seemed to mention my bisexuality. It became something that I only would share with my closest friends. We're now up to the 2000s, and I do NaNoWriMo, and I find out about this thing called LiveJournal. And if you were on LiveJournal in the early 2000s, you might know that that was a hotbed for gay and queer activity. So that was when I started reconnecting with my bisexuality and just appreciating that part of me. I started learning about polyamory, started learning about BDSM, and recognizing that, I kind of don't mind that. Reading a lot of Lord of the Rings / fan fiction. It was a very queer time in my life. And actually, there was a young woman that I became friends with, and I actually don't remember how it happened, but we got to chatting about our sexuality, and she expressed interest in me, and I told her that, I'm married, I'm faithful to my husband. If we were to do anything, it would have to include him. Long story short, there was a short period of time where my husband and I were part of a throuple. It didn't end well, but it ended amicably. And I'm not going to say too much because most of it is not my story to tell. But that was just a really interesting time. And so I think of the Lord of the Rings as being a queer story because of all that. And it just would not have happened without LiveJournal. So for the next couple of decades, nothing much happened. I was married. As far as anybody knew, I was straight. Every once in a while, I would tease to somebody that maybe I wasn't completely straight, but other than listening to the occasional Indigo Girls song, it didn't really do much. But through this time, I just kind of started to develop a feeling that, man, I have done the whole sexuality thing wrong. I got started on the wrong path. I have made all the wrong choices. I am not able to be accepted by the queer community. I don't feel straight enough to be straight. I've just screwed up this whole thing. So I just focused on my career and professional development and leadership and facilitation and training, and that's where I have derived nearly all of my identity, is just work and being a coach, and I do love it. It's just that this whole other thing, it's been part of it. Fortunately, I've now come to the end of that period, I think, of feeling like I'm doing the whole sexuality thing wrong. I have to give Emily Nagoski props. She and her book, Come As You Are, really have benefited me in big ways. And I'm grateful for the chance to continue living and continue building my story and I'm grateful that we have a world where we can hear each other's stories and learn from each other. I really don't want to go back to being canceled. I hope that doesn't ever happen again. But having been through it and eventually come out the other side, I feel like it's okay. I'm not super thrilled about the idea of showing up at gatherings of queer people just because I still feel like I'm not going to be accepted because I'm married to a straight man. Anyway, what we have now is complexity, and that's where I live. I live in complexity rather than confusion, and I can accept myself and be proud of who I am, knowing that there are no easy answers here. There's no easy story. Thanks for listening along. Bye.